Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2 of FX and Hulu's Shogun. So I've decided to do something a little different for this first video. As you probably noticed, I've labeled this one as having both spoilers and non-spoilers. Generally, I do non-spoilers for my first video for a show, just to kind of give my general thoughts on it, thumbs up, thumbs down, very broad opinions. And then if it's a show I'm going to continue to cover from week to week, I'll start doing spoilers at that point. And I still want to do that here. So this video will start as a traditional kind of series premiere video for me, with me just giving my overall thoughts. But at the end, I'm going to have a spoiler section just for this video, because this appears to be a pretty complex and dense show, and I think it will be of some benefit to lay out in a slightly spoiler way what's going on in these first two episodes. So I'll put a timestamp in the description for whenever the spoiler stuff starts. If you're watching, you already know what time that is, but I don't know how long it's going to take me to get there, so I don't know what that's going to be. All right, so now that I've gotten all that out of the way, let's talk about this 2-episode premiere. So Shogun, this TV series, the 2024 version, is based on a 1975 novel of the same name written by James Clavell. The novel was adapted to a TV series in 1980, starring Richard Chamberlain as the John Blackthorne character that we saw in these first two episodes, and Toshiro Mifune as Taranga. Oh, God, what if I lost his name? Toranaga. Jesus Christ, what the fuck? That was the worst time for me to have a typo. Toranaga, there we go. But Toshiro Mifune, he was a fucking legend back in the day, man. Like, you know how guys like Tarantino and Scorsese have actors that they like to work with consistently? Well, Mifune was Akira Kurosawa's guy back in like the 50s and the 60s, and he was in all of his shit. He was fucking awesome. I'm a huge Akira Kurosawa fan. I had a thing I bought on eBay that was like an 11 DVD set of like all of his movies. That it came straight from Japan. You couldn't even buy it here. Like, I was like that big of a fan of Kurosawa and Mifune working together, like this fucking dream team and shit. And I'm sure that 1980 miniseries that aired with Mifune, I bet he instantly gave some credibility to that series. I don't know. That's not to imply they didn't have any beforehand, but yeah, I don't know what he was in the 80s, especially for American audiences, but like I said, he was the fucking man in the 50s and 60s in Japan. And that has absolutely nothing to do with this show, but whatever, man. This 2024 adaptation is created by Justin Marks and Rachel Kondo. Justin was nominated for an Oscar last year for his work writing on Top Gun Maverick, but otherwise he doesn't have a ton of credits to his name. He was a showrunner on a show called Counterpart that aired on Starz. I never saw it. It starred J.K. Simmons. I think it ran like 2 seasons or something like that. And that's pretty much it. Kondo is his wife and has even fewer credits to her name. She only has this one. But I feel like she's going to provide a bit of strict adherence to like cultural accuracy because apparently she is of Japanese descent. So she could probably speak from speak from experience. I don't know if she's that old. I don't think she was around back then, but with a level of knowledge of her culture, she could bring some realism and some accuracy, I think, to these scripts. So those two are the showrunners. This adaptation stars Hiroyuki Sanada as Toranaga. We've been seeing him in a lot of stuff lately. I think most notably of late would be his role in, he was in John Wick 4. And I think the most we've probably seen him was in, I think it was season 2 of Westworld. The one with the samurai world. He was in there. Cosmo Jarvis, I don't know this guy. He stars as Blackthorn, and oh god, I hate this motherfucker, man. Like, I don't know if this character is meant to be as obnoxious as I take him, but this is an insolent white man, y'all. Like, on top of him playing such like an entitled and audacious character, he just has a generally unlikable face to me. It sucks, man, because I can barely stand this motherfucker right now, and I know he's gonna be around a while. So let's talk about these first 2 episodes in a non-spoiler way, and I want to start by addressing a lot of the comparisons to Game of Thrones that I've seen over the last, I guess, 24 to 48 hours since the review embargo's been lifted. Accurate. You can't help but watch this and see the influence of Game of Thrones everywhere, which is interesting since the book it's based on precedes George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series. But Game of Thrones laid the groundwork for how to successfully pull off a show like this, and you could tell that Marks and Kondo took meticulous notes. And so far, I think it's working pretty well. These first 2 episodes were largely set up, but I didn't come away from these 2 like, oh my god, this is about to be the greatest show ever. But at the same time, I didn't come away from the first 2 episodes of Game of Thrones feeling that way either. And even though Game of Thrones ultimately ended poorly, I still think it is one of the greatest achievements in the history of television. Game of Thrones' biggest asset, and I think this is why the show was so popular, is that it appealed to like multiple types of viewers. Like if you were someone who was into battles and big special effects and dragons and violence, Game of Thrones had that in spades. If you were someone who was into like the political intrigue or the plot twist and the backstabbing, all that kind of stuff, or the lore of that world, Game of Thrones scratched that itch too. And the same dynamics are at play here. And I want to start with the politics because not only is it somewhat convoluted, but these plot lines and these figures are actually, these figures as in these people, are based on real historical people in real moments. So I want to tie that stuff together, show respect to the individuals on which this is based, and help make the show make a little bit more sense. And I'm going to do that between right now and the spoiler portion. So like Game of Thrones, Shogun has all the political intrigue. When we open the series, we learned that a taiko has recently passed. Now, I looked up this term taiko, T-A-I-K-O. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, hypothetical Japanese viewer. But the only definition I was able to find was that it's some type of drum, or in some cases referring to the drummer specifically, him or herself. But when I started looking into ties between this show's characters and real-life historical figures, I stumbled upon the term again, and it means like a retired regent, like the 5 regents that we see in these first 2 episodes. And the taiko who has passed away at the beginning of this series is based on a real-life guy named Toyotomi Hideyoshi, whose real death sparked the very feud that we are seeing depicted in this series. The political intrigue, at least for now, and similar to Game of Thrones, revolves around how these 5 individuals who are currently sharing power will attempt to become Shogun. And, I mentioned Game of Thrones had a ton of lore, which it always impressed me that George R.R. Martin put that much effort into forming this world and creating this world for these characters. Well, this show's lore is real life. like you don't have to go buy 18 different books that George R.R. Martin wrote to expand and fill out this world. You can just go on Wikipedia for free and learn all you need to learn about this. But I personally, I didn't do a lot. I learned only enough to learn that the show is based on real life events and enough to not be spoiled. But if you're someone who's fascinated by all of this, there's a wealth of historical information you can find online, obviously. And lastly, if you're someone who may be bored by political machinations and historical retellings, this show has all the action and violence for you as well. I don't know if it's going to reach the Game of Thrones levels in that regard. We're only 2 episodes in. But we do have a few pretty gnarly deaths in these first couple episodes. I'm not going to spoil them by talking about them, but one in particular, I'm just like, man, y'all was going to treat this motherfucker like a hot dog. Fucking human hot dog. One way I could see this show actually maybe even besting Game of Thrones is locations. And you're like, what? Like, Game of Thrones is the best locations. It did. But if these are the type of settings and visuals that I'm getting in the first 2 episodes, I can't imagine what we're going to have in store. Beautiful locations. There's one where they're like in like the woods or in a forest. And it's gorgeous, man. And I always find value in fresh locations that are from other parts of the world where it just kind of feels like, I haven't seen 17th century Japan that looked this nice before. You know, I like to see something like that. Whereas, you know, as opposed to like going to a city in the United States before, and a city in the United States they say it's whatever city, but it's probably Atlanta or Los Angeles or Toronto or whatever. Toronto's obviously not in the United States. Anyway, first 2 episodes, they're largely set up, letting you know what the situation is like in the East at that time. When I say the East, I mean the eastern part of the world. Who these people are, what their motivations are. And now that we've got that, I kind of expect this show to really, really start moving. I'm going to be doing full coverage here, shooting to get videos up on Tuesday evenings. Before I move to the spoiler section, though, I want to address one thing that could be confusing, and this, again, also ties into real life. This show mentions a handful of people and locations. England, Portugal, Spain, of course, Japan. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the spoiler section, so if you're like, hey, wait a minute, hang on, like, the video's not over. There's going to be some more of the spoiler section. I just wanted to give some general thoughts for people who haven't watched yet. But I want to point out that characters will often say in English on the show that a character is speaking Portuguese, but we hear English. And I looked this up as well. That's intentional. During this time, Portuguese was a heavily used lingua franca, which is like a common language used between different native languages to communicate. During the Roman Empire, like they would take over certain places, and there would be these certain languages that they could both speak to kind of have like this middle language between these two parties. During this time, Portuguese was the lingua franca between the Japanese people and the Europeans, but they're choosing to have those characters just speak English here on the show instead. And my guess is that this is just to kind of like embrace a bit of what it was really like back then, without forcing the audience to have to read subtitles for the entire show. Like, 1 minute they're speaking Portuguese, 1 minute they're speaking Japanese, but the whole time we're reading English subtitles. I guess that's probably why they wanted to do that. So I just wanted to clear that up real quick. And now I'm going to head off to the spoiler section, where I just want to go over a couple of more things, kind of expound a little bit on what I was mentioning about the religious feuds and the feuding between the 5 regions and stuff like that. But for starters, there won't be future spoiler sections. The whole thing will be spoilers. So I just want to let that be known. All right, so that's it for the non-spoiler stuff. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail right now. With the spoiler stuff, looks like I'm at 14 minutes on my clock, which is going to be probably 15 and a half minutes into the video, give or take. I just found these first few episodes to be pretty dense, so I wanted to go further over the episode in detail here for people who have watched it, but maybe kind of like, what the fuck's going on? So, like I said in the non-spoiler section, you have these 5 regents who are sharing power at this time. Toranaga is based on a real-life guy named Tokugawa Ieyasu, who was the founder and first shogun of the Tokugawa shogunate. So I guess we kind of know. Super spoiler. we know how the show's gonna end, or at least the first season. I don't know, but I don't particularly care about knowing that. I mean, he's the main character, so I don't feel spoiled in knowing that he starts the first shogunate. But that doesn't mean that that's the end of the show either. We learned in these first couple episodes that he turned down the opportunity to be the sole regent, and we also learned that the Taiko's son and heir is in Toranaga's care until he turns 16. I think all that's going to be probably pretty important in future episodes. We also learned that there's a religious feud between the Protestants from England, like Blackthorn, and the Catholics of Portugal. And the Catholics of Portugal are presumably playing nice to the Japanese on one hand, but truly consider themselves to kind of be the owners of Japan, as Portugal and Spain have presumptively and foolishly split up the world amongst each other. Toranaga learns this from Blackthorn in one of the final moments of the second episode. Blackthorn also tells him that there are secret Portuguese outposts, like in various locations. They mention one in Macau that makes everyone gasp. Again, kind of like helping to place the geography here. If you envision a world map, Japan is like an island on the far, 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 far east side, all the way on the right side of your map. And on the mainland, you'll see China, and you'll also see Russia and whatever. But Macau is kind of like a coastal city just south of Hong Kong on the border of Japan. I'm sorry, on the border of China. So when we're talking about, there's a moment where Blackthorn talks about the route that they would travel, that they traveled to get there, and he says we went through like Magellan's Pass, and it's something that like it's a secret route, nobody knows about it because the Portuguese and I think the Portuguese and the Spanish kept it secret or something like that, or whatever, or Japanese people, I can't remember who he said kept it secret, but like traveling through that route, it would be of note that they would have to pass Macau because it is very close to Japan. So for them to learn that there could potentially be enemies plotting against them there, that's a big concern. Macau's pretty close, and if you were sailing from Japan south on your map alongside that coast, moving toward below India and moving toward Africa or around Africa, south of Africa, and then coming up north around the western side of Africa to moving up to where Portugal and Spain are at, you'd have to pass Macau. So probably why they reacted that way. Blackthorn also tells them that these outposts and these bases or whatever are employing, these Portuguese bases are employing Japanese Ronin to work for them. So that's going to be something that we're probably going to see be pretty eventful in future episodes. Excuse me. I think it's worthwhile to consider here too just how truthful Blackthorn may or may not be in this scene, given his hatred for the Portuguese and also given the situation that he's in. So I don't think the show implied that he was half truthing or lying, but I think if this show is going to be one where you're going to look at the political intrigue on par with Game of Thrones, it's important to always be thinking about people's motives and what they had to gain or lose. And keeping that mindset, if this show is going to be on that level with Game of Thrones, we should probably want to just keep that mindset. Let's see. Oh, this whole religious battle seems to be the main focus of these first two episodes. The translator that we meet here, named Mariko, she's Catholic and works with the Catholic priest that we see in this episode. I can't remember this guy's name, but she doesn't want to believe that this guy's up to no good. They're both Catholic translators. They believe in the same shit. She's like, that's my guy. We also learned that she's the last of her family. She's been spared after everyone else was killed for reasons unbeknownst to us. I thought that information really led some valuable context to the scene that we saw in episode 1 where she talks that one mother out of killing herself after her husband's big mouth got his whole bloodline wiped out. Like, man, you step up to defend your boy and now you gotta kill yourself and your son? Like, god damn, dog. That's what I get for having your bad shit. But she says something to the effect of like, you have to be strong enough to avoid that mercy. Like, she calls like killing yourself in response to the deaths of your husband and son a mercy. Like, you have to be strong enough to not do that and to press through. She's like, what's the point of me then? And he's like, if he thought that if he said that you should be alive, that's your point. So I think that woman, that mother, again, if we're looking at Game of Thrones, those kind of people, I don't want to compare this show to Game of Thrones constantly, but I want to get in that mindset just in case. Those are the kind of people that will pop up on Game of Thrones later. like if Toranaga's in a bad spot or something at some point, that's the kind of thing where they're like, oh, that woman from episode 1 or 2 that was spared, here she is to save him. You know, that's the kind of thing that comes up later. So just making note of that. Toranaga hopes to use Blackthorn and his fervent Christian beliefs to kind of like sow dissent between the remaining regents who are split between Catholic and Christian, presumably. His enemy, Ishido, who plans to execute Toranaga and eventually take control himself. He learns of this kind of plan to utilize Blackthorn to sow distrust, and he understands that this can't happen. I think we're meant to believe that he's the person who sent that maid or whatever for Blackthorn at the end of the second episode. But just like Game of Thrones, who knows, right? That show went several seasons letting us believe that Jaime and Cersei killed Jon Arryn. So who knows what this show has planned for whoever sent Blackthorn's would-be assassin. Maybe that person won't even matter. So that's all I got. I wanted to add this spoiler section, like I said, to kind of go over this whole thing with the 5 regents as well as the religious stuff going on, just to kind of help make things a little bit clear. I'm sure there's other things I'd like to discuss that I'm probably forgetting, but I didn't want this video to be 40 minutes, and I'm sure this is going to be a pretty dense show that's going to require a lot of my time in the future, so I kind of want to let myself off the hook here and give myself kind of like this non-spoilery general thoughts video, and then I'll see you guys for episode 3 next week, where we will really get into the weeds, talk about this show, and get, I think, a better feel for what kind of show we're going to be watching this season. So until next week, peace.